In life, we all encounter obstacles, and those obstacles come in all different shapes, sizes, and forms. The question is, how do we handle those obstacles? Do we attack them head on, or do we allow them to make us quit? Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up on themselves, their dreams, or their goals. We will interview successful people from all walks of life as they share their no-quit stories when they had the choice to give up or give in, but they didn't. We hope you find our episodes inspiring, motivating, positive, and thought-provoking. We thank you for listening, and we hope to be that jolt of positivity as you go for your greatness. Welcome to episode number 97 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is resiliency. Our quote of the day comes to us from Yasmin Mogahed. Resilience is very different than being numb. Resilience means you experience, you feel, you fail, you hurt. You fall, but you keep going. It is an honor to bring you today's episode. Our guest is a gentleman by the name of Michael O'Brien that has a tremendous no-quit story. While riding his bicycle, Michael got hit head-on by an SUV going 40 miles an hour by a driver that should not have been behind the wheel. With devastating injuries, Michael's wife was told while he was in the ICU that if he hadn't been in such great shape, he would have definitely died. Today, Michael is running an extremely successful business, and he delivers a lot of great content on today's episode. Michael, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Thanks, Chris. Awesome to be here. I can't wait to talk about the topic. It's something that I'm really passionate about.
Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. So the first question I ask everybody is, are you ready to bring it today?
I am ready to bring it. Damn Skippy, man.
So the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never give up. And I know you have a great no-quit story that I was hoping you wouldn't mind sharing with our listeners.
I would love to, because I think it's really relatable to a lot of your listeners. So my no-quit story, I call my last bad day. It happened on July 11th, 2001. I was out in New Mexico for a corporate meeting. So my corporate job at that time was I was a marketing director for my pharmaceutical company. Pretty good gig. I was having a good time. I was a little stressed back then, but living the American dream. And I brought my bike out to train for a bike race, and I was just doing laps around the hotel property. And on the fourth lap that morning before the meeting, a Ford Explorer crossed the center line of the road, swerved directly into my lane, hit me head on going about 40 miles an hour. And I remember it all, from the sound of me hitting the truck to his windshield, the screech of his brakes, and got knocked unconscious. And then the EMTs came and I regained consciousness. Now, the first thing I asked, and this is a question that only the cyclists listening will really understand. I asked the EMTs, how's my bike? And I often use humor to cut tension. And they were like, I think you have a traumatic brain injury. So they didn't really laugh at that. I sort of laughed inside. But as I waited for the medevac to take me to the trauma center, because I was too far away from Albuquerque, I told myself if I lived, life was going to be different.
Wow, that is quite a story. So if you don't mind me asking, what happened after the medevac? And I know you're crushing it today in your career and doing amazing things, I guess 17 years later. So what was going through the process of after the accident?
So after the accident, I had a little bit of a stay in the ICU for a few days. And then when I came out of the ICU, I started to learn about the accident. The guy had a revoked license. He should not have been driving. So in a lot of ways, I was like, this should not have happened. This sucks, right? This is so unfair. And they told me really I was going to have a lifetime of limitations. Physically, I broke a whole bunch of everything. But the big thing that made it a life and death situation at the accident scene was the left femur shattered. And when the left femur shattered, it lacerated my femoral artery. So the doctors told my wife, when my wife flew out from New Jersey to New Mexico, they said, listen, if he was 10 years older or not in shape, he would have died before he got to the hospital. So she often likes to say, listen, that bike almost killed you, but the bike saved your life, because being in shape, I had the cardiovascular system. So I could withstand a torn femoral artery or lacerated femoral artery. So, but they kept on telling me like, hey, knee replacement, surgeries, dependency. And I got pretty dark, Chris, pretty quickly. I got angry. So life was different, but not in the way that I wanted. I got revengeful. I wanted like eye for an eye, angry, frustrated. I would try to put on the pretty optimistic fake it until you make it face. Like when people were around, I'm like, yeah, we're going to get this done. I'm going to work hard. But when they left, because visiting hours at the hospital were over, I went pretty dark. And I stayed that way until they flew me back to New Jersey and they took me to the Kessler Institute for Rehab, same place they took Superman, Christopher Reeves, back in the day when he had his equestrian accident. And I had a physical rehab session, and I looked around the room and I noticed like who was getting better and who wasn't, like who had a no quit attitude and no quit living and who wasn't. And I realized a lot of it started with their mindset and the story that they were telling themselves. And I realized in that moment that if I was going to get to be the best I could be, the best husband, father, leader at work, friend, just, me, that I had to start shifting my mindset and shifting my story from I'm a victim, I can't do this, I don't have this anymore, to, as cliche as it sounds, like a victor. Like I'm going to let my response to this accident define me and start focusing in on what I still could had and still could do. And that was the start of it. And so the journey since has not been linear. It hasn't been supersonic. It's been one day at a time, making every day a little bit better.
You mentioned something that I just want to touch on for a second. Is you talked about the feelings of anger and being revengeful and an eye for an eye. And I just want to touch on something for a minute, because I think in no way can I say I know exactly what you're going through, but I think all of our listeners, in essence, have been burned at some point in their life, whether it's business, family, relationship, personal. We all encounter different things. And I think, to me, it's something that I've been writing down almost every day for me is when you get hit head on, pardon the analogy.
Yeah, no problem.
in life, you have one of two choices. You can be bitter or you can get better. And I just want to commend you, because you clearly could have gotten revengeful and an eye for an eye, and nobody would have ever said you're wrong and what a bad person you are, because you were out on a bicycle and somebody who should not have been driving hit you head on, and you did not get bitter. What you've done is you've gotten better, and I commend you for that. So if you wouldn't mind just giving our listeners a 30-second synopsis of who you are and what you're doing today.
Yeah, sure thing. So, and thanks for that. Because, I could have gone bitter and stayed there and no one would have blamed me. So today I run an executive coaching firm. So I went back to work after my accident and slowly got into it, and I actually moved my way up to the executive level. So when I left corporate pharma and healthcare, I was responsible for a $4 billion business unit as a sales and marketing executive. But something happened in the ICU that I write about in my book. I knew I was going to get into executive coaching. And it was only a matter of planting that seed, which I did back then, and just continue to water it. And in 2014, I was like, it's time to make that move and start Peloton coaching and consulting. I actually came up with the whole concept when I was in the hospital. And now I help mainly sales and marketing leaders who are juggling it all, sort of like the earlier version of me, but they don't necessarily have complete success, right? They have some of those negative stories and emotions, worry and doubt, sort of with them, maybe a little bit too frequently. So I help those successful sales and marketing leaders really sort of slay it and continue, slay their business, but also slay those negative stories that hold them back from complete success. And it's something I love doing. I love building leaders. I love helping them build their cultures at work. Peloton, the name of it is basically a Peloton. We all know Peloton cycles, those exercise bikes, but a Peloton is a group of cyclists in a race, in a bike race. So think Tour de France. But for me, a Peloton is a metaphor for tribes and teams at work, friend circles, cultures, all in the spirit of that we're better together. And so I love helping leaders sort of bring that unity in their workplace, because I know if they do that, they can change more lives.
No, I appreciate you sharing a little bit about what you're doing, and you're definitely crushing it in that industry. And I've only known you for a short period, but I know one of your partners on your mastermind group, and it's been awesome to get to know you two. And I just think you guys haven't even scratched the surface on what you guys are going to do. So I'm really excited to continue to see that.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I know Dayne is awesome. I know you had a good time with Dayne. He's a fantastic coach. He comes at coaching a little bit different. Coaching on the court, like athletic performance, I sort of hit the comfort zone. But yeah, we make a pretty good tag team, East Coast, West Coast, yin and yang type of thing going on.
Well, I hope I can be the quasi East Coast part of the triangle at some point.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, absolutely.
So I wanted to ask you, if you had to define yourself in one word, what would that word be?
I would say resilient. I was never like the fastest kid, and God knows I wasn't the smartest kid on my block. But I could always get back up. Like I signed every book, keep pedaling. It's just like, I'm going to keep on pedaling, no coasting, just going to keep on pedaling. And I believe that is, part of the secret of life is to get in the race and keep going. And I would say, yeah, that would be the one word I would use to describe me.
I would definitely say that's probably a extremely accurate word. So how do you define success?
Wow, that's a great question. Because I do talk about complete success. So for me, it's, there's a pursuit, especially like where we live, Chris, and like metropolitan New York City, there's a lot of external like trophies of success. And I was in that camp before my accident, before my last bad day. I thought like, hey, get the car, get the promotion, all that jazz, and I'd be happy. But I was really just chasing happiness. So I'm still a big believer in like, hey, you work hard and you can buy some nice things and do some nice trips and all that stuff like that. I think that's still cool, right? But I also try to work with people and work with myself around success, around like having some inner peace, right? Some feeling of like self-worth and self-compassion and connection with others and making it about other people. So I share in the book 20 ways of sort of showing up so you can move from human doer to human being. And I think a lot of those sort of speak to a more of a inner peace type of success that I think is missing with a lot of hard-charging executives. When they got all the trophies, but inside they don't necessarily have the calm that they're looking for or the connections in their life that they're looking for. So for me, it's that those two pieces coming together. That's my definition of success.
No, and I appreciate you sharing your definition. And the best part about that question is the fact that every single one of our guests answers it differently. And for me, one of the best parts about hosting the show is I have my questions laid out, and obviously I know a lot about my guests before, but a lot of the times the conversations and the answers go in different directions, and I find myself taking a copious amount of notes because I'm always looking to improve. And I love when that question and then the answer about success is answered because it goes in so many different directions. And the best part about it is there is no right or wrong answer, because what success is to you might be similar to me, or what success to me could be completely opposite for you, and that's perfectly okay. And that's the best part about hosting the show, is that we get to take people's no-quit stories and figure out who they are and what they went through and mindset and all the different things that help take somebody from one level to the next level. And for me, it's never about, is somebody going to encounter an obstacle? Because I don't care if you're 15 years old or if you're 85 years old, every single person has had those challenges and obstacles that hit them at different points in life. And some are amazingly tough and some are, just a bump in the road. But it's always the answer and the question of, do you get bitter or do you get better? And I really appreciate you talking a little bit about your definition of success. So one of the things we always look to do is add value to our listeners. And I was curious if you have either a daily or a morning ritual that you swear by.
Oh, I love this question, Chris. This is a great setup because, and we got to have you on the Performance Zone with Coach Dayne and me, because we ask this question of all of our guests. So I'm a big believer in morning rituals. Now, when I was younger, I didn't really think anything of it. But what I do each morning, wake up, 20 ounces of water first thing. I think hydration is key to overall health, physical health. So I get my 20 ounces of water in. I go downstairs and I start doing some of my thinking and planning for the day. I really try to fixate on what are my 3 big priorities for the day, that I'm going to put a disproportional amount of energy and time into. Doesn't mean that I'm limited to 3 things that day. The days are busy like your days. We do more than 3 things, but I want to make sure I move those 3 big rocks. Then I will spend some time meditating, because I'm a big believer. I'm actually trying to help all my executives sort of get there in 2018 and sort of lose the woo-woo, hippy-dippy feel about meditation, because I think it really does help performance. Then I'll do some work, maybe flexibility work or core work, which I need to do, and then I'll get on my bike. So I try to do all that. So I try to get my workout in the morning. So I tend to be an early riser. When it gets to be a little bit late at night, I sort of turn into a pumpkin. But for me, it's a lot about honoring my values. So one of my values is health. So the water, the physical activity, the meditation, all that stuff is a way for me to show up right away and start honoring that value of health. And it just sets up the day great. Now, I don't do it every day. Some days I'm traveling or whatnot, and I can't do it exactly the same. But the intention is I do it every day.
No, I think that's important, and I definitely appreciate you sharing a little bit about what you do in the morning. And that's another question that has really become a focus of ours, and a lot of our listeners have reached out to me, and I always provide my email address, which is chris@noquitliving.com. And I'd like to get ideas and questions and suggestions from listeners, because I want to make sure that we always provide value. And the question about a morning or a daily ritual for me has been really neat, because every single guest has something that they swear by that they do. Some of them are evening rituals, some of them are midday rituals, and a lot of them are morning rituals. And just like the question of how do you define success, there's not a right or wrong answer, because what you do in the morning works for you. What I do works for me. And the one thing that I always recommend to our listeners and to my clients is, if you're looking to try something new or try something different or get an idea in the sense from what other people are doing and try it to see if it works for you. So for example, let's say, you worked out for 2 hours every morning and that's what worked for you. I would never tell anybody just automatically jump into 2 hours and commit to it forever. I would say maybe this would be something for you. So I would recommend to our listeners is always just keep their mind, eyes and ears open for different suggestions, because you never know where that next great idea or suggestion might come from.
No, it's great, Chris. I'm right there with you. We get a variety of different answers too on our podcast. And my feeling, just like success, you got to find what fits for you. Try some things on for size, and if it's working, awesome, continue it. If it ain't, then drop it and try to find those ingredients that best fit you and your lifestyle, and really sort of set you up for the type of day that you want to have.
And I'm glad you touched on that, because Dayne and 3 other guests in the last 2 months have spoken about something along the lines of almost word for word is how you start your day is how you win your day. And I think it's so important, the mindset, the physical aspect. As you mentioned, the meditation piece is very important. And then for me, the biggest thing is the gratitude. And I have 3 amazing kids, and they are my number one priority. And I just have so much to be grateful for. Amazing parents, amazing family and friends, and really good people in my corner. And for me, about a month or 2 ago is I just kind of tweaked up my morning ritual a little bit, and I've just found that mentally it's just put me in a better state. And I can't say I win and crush every day, but I have to tell you and our listeners that when I start my day with gratitude and when I start my day on my terms, I definitely have a better chance and opportunity to win that day. And I wish I could say I win every single day, but yeah. it always puts you in a better mindset to attack the day. So we're going to change lanes here for a second. Assuming the 20-year-old version of yourself would have listened, what is the one piece of advice you would give the 20-year-old version of yourself?
Oh, great question. I would tell them to stop chasing happiness. As I mentioned before, there's a quote, I forget who I heard it from, but it sort of goes like this: like, when you chase happiness, all you find is despair. But when you chase wisdom, you find joy. And the 20-year-old version of me, I was doing what I thought society wanted me to do. Graduate high school, go to college. I went to school down in Virginia. And, around 20, you're thinking about graduating and getting a gig and then marrying the girl and having the family. And I was just sort of chasing things. I wasn't necessarily present and being thoughtful about my pursuits. And I think chasing happiness was, a big thing for me. It was like, I started my career and I was just sort of chasing it. And I caught things, right? I caught things for a moment and I was happy. And then they went away. It was sort of like a vapor finish line. And so, but the moment I had it gave me hope. Like if I kept on chasing, I would catch it and I would be able to grab onto it long term. And I went through my 20s sort of like that. And I think, whether we call my accident a given or a gift or what have you, but it was a bit of a wake-up call that the universe gave me to say, hey, listen, stop chasing the happiness and just sort of be present. And I would say that would be the big thing I would tell the 20-year-old version of Michael O'Brien if he would listen. But I don't know if he would have listened, man. I'm like, I don't think he would have been like, oh, what's this old dude telling me what to do? So I'm not sure.
No, that's always an interesting question I ask, and I've gotten some amazing answers, and it's always fun because everybody is spot on again with their answers, and obviously the $1 million unknown question is, would the 20-year-old version have listened? And I don't know if we all would have listened, but I believe we all would have listened in an instant and to an extent as far as who the message is coming from. So I appreciate you sharing that. Wanted to follow up that question. If you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Wow, that's a great. You got some great questions, Chris. I think, like, I don't know much about my family history, to be honest. It's one of my to-dos, but somewhere, some way, where in my family tree, there was someone who came over from the great island of Ireland and had the courage to leave what was maybe just familiar, we'll call it a comfort zone, for a better life. And I would really want to sit down with that person. I know, like, there's probably some really great responses you get, like some like world figures and like, Buddha and to Jesus, to every point in between, from a religious perspective or a business perspective. But from a family perspective, that one move, I would really love to sit down and find out, like, why, like, what was that motivation to break out of the comfort zone for a new life where you may not have known anybody, new beginnings. I think it's really courageous to do that. And I would like really want to have a good dinner. I'm not sure if I would want to have corned beef and cabbage. I would definitely would love to have a Guinness with them. But so we might have a potato, who knows? But I think it would be a little bit closer to home. That's the person I would love to sit down with.
And you'd probably find out a lot of really interesting things, and it would be, for you, an amazing dinner because you'll get to understand why that first trip happened or all the thoughts behind it. So I think that would definitely be quite an interesting dinner for you. So we're going to change lanes here again, and we're going to switch over to what we call our hot seat questions. And the only rule is if you could just please answer the questions with the first thing that comes to mind.
Gotcha.
Awesome. So I know you said your meal question, but if you had one last meal and you could choose anything for it, what would it be?
Oh, it'd be a burrito from Burrito Brothers in Washington, D.C.
What is your favorite smell?
I would say this is a good question. I would say honey. That's the first thing that popped into my head.
Favorite sport?
Oh, cycling. Come on.
Favorite team?
Toronto Blue Jays.
All-time favorite movie?
Breaking Away.
Do you have an all-time favorite book?
No. I love them all for different reasons.
Favorite singer or band?
I'm going to go with U2.
That is funny. That is, the last two episodes have been U2. If you were in a foxhole and you could only choose one person to have your back, who would that be?
My wife.
That was pretty painless, right?
Yeah, that was awesome.
So I wanted to touch for a second on your book, if you wouldn't mind just briefly telling our listeners a little bit about your book, but also if you wouldn't mind telling where all the proceeds go, because I think it's amazing what you do.
Oh, thanks, Chris. No, thanks for giving me the opportunity to share with that. So the book is called Shift, Creating Better Tomorrows. It's available on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com and then through my website. But Shift obviously is a play on like shifting gears of a bicycle, but shifting of mindset, shifting that we do in our careers and our life. And what I do is I bring the reader from that last bad day through my recovery and sort of the moment I got back on the bike. Which was a big moment. It's what my TEDx talk was around, and around perspective. And so it's really a story. It starts off as a cycling story because I was on my bike, but it's really a story of resilience and love and like community because I had a great Peloton behind me, people just really supporting me. The lead of the Peloton was my wife. So there's love, there's community and resilience. That's the story. In the last chapter, I give the reader 20 ways of showing up, 20 ways of being, from being accepting to number 3 is be forgiving, which was key in, making myself better and not bitter, that act of forgiving. So I give the reader 20 ways of showing up so they can move from human doer to human being. And when I wrote the book, because it took me 16 years to write it, it came out last year, a lot of people were like, you got to write this book. It would be great for speaking gigs and coaching and publicity. And it just felt empty, man. It just was like, I don't know. I would write it, then I'd stop, write some more, stop. And then I took a course and I had a big aha. I said, wow, this book is really for my daughters. They were 3.5 years old at the time, 7 months old for my youngest one, Grady. And so the book was really for them and anybody else that might face a challenge, which, as we've talked about, everyone faces a challenge and everyone needs a little inspiration to get over it. And so then I took it one step further. Okay, so the book isn't about my business and speaking gigs. It was for my daughter and the people reading it. And then I was like, well, if it's not about the money, then why don't we give the money away? So one organization I feel very strongly about, passionate about, I've been a member for a number of years, is World Bicycle Relief. They're based in Chicago, but they help young women in countries like Zaire, Malawi, and Kenya, and other countries within Africa. They give them the gift of mobility by giving them a bicycle. So they can stay in school, they can get to the marketplace, and they can get to healthcare. So for many of these young girls, when they're like 10, 11, 12, 13, they reach a point where they might actually have to quit school because they literally have to walk 6 kilometers each way to get to school and back. So I know we love to say, oh, when I was younger, I had to walk uphill in the snow both ways, but they're literally walking 6 kilometers each way to get to school. And sometimes the only way to get to school is on the back of a motorbike driven by a young man in his 20s. And that just exposes them to a lot of sexual assault and sexual abuse. And so a lot of them drop out. But when they drop out, what happens is that they marry earlier. They don't finish school, so they don't have really the education for their independence and empowerment. They start to have bigger families. So World Bicycle Relief comes into their village and provides them a bike. And so they can stay in school. They get married later in life. They have smaller families, but they have more economic power and their life changes. And all the people around them, their life changes too. So every book that we sell helps build more bikes for World Bicycle Relief. And it changes lives halfway around the world. And I'm a big believer that if you change a life anywhere, you change lives everywhere, because there's a cascading impact to when we make a difference in our worlds, in our communities. And so one of the best things about the book, besides the reaction, and it got a silver medal award from the North American Book Awards. I've learned that last month. But it's really just, it's the response, but also the fact that it's going to make the world a better place. And it was all about that message. And so I was able to sort of hit the target in terms of what the book was all about.
That's awesome. And I commend you for not only the award, that's amazing. I didn't know about that. But more importantly I think it's just incredible is you took a book that was meaningful for you, and you shared your story, and you're now giving back, and all the proceeds go to an unbelievable organization that I've never heard of. And I just think it's awesome that you do that. So I definitely commend you for that. And one quick side note is, you talked about we all joke around as, we used to walk to school uphill both ways in the snow. And, I never understood how you could ever go uphill both ways. And I guess I'll never understand that, but I'm glad you shared what you shared about your book, because I just think it's awesome. So before we let you go, I wanted to ask if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners.
Yeah, so I would say, in terms of resilience, there are a lot of different ways we can get there, and you can build it. And I think resilience is an emotional muscle like grit that can be worked and made stronger, just like any other muscle in our body. And a lot of times it takes the ability to sort of shift perspective, have times of reflection, have a greater purpose, but have a really good community. And that's the thing that I'll stress. And there's a couple different things I've written about over the years about building resilience. But what I love, because we found each other through the Leaders of Transformation group through Facebook. And when you have great people in your camp that don't let you quit, right, that help you become more resilient, to help you keep pedaling, because there's a greater purpose, and you're coming together. As cliche as this sounds, Chris, it's like 1 + 1 = 3. And I think we have to get smarter about who we have in our tribe, our network, our Peloton, because that matters. I think Jim Rohn said it years ago, like we're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. And, a lot of people hang around with a bunch of Eeyores, and not so many Tiggers or Winnie the Poohs out there, like, the Debbie Downers. And when you're hanging with those people that see the world as glass half empty, then it's so easy to take on their energy and their philosophy and their attitude, and then it's easy to quit. So the thing I'll leave people with is like, be really discerning about who's in your Peloton, and make sure that they're feeding you and you feed them, because when that is working together, we can do a lot of great things in this world. And right now, I think where society is, we need to do a lot of great things in the world. So we need to come together as opposed to running to our silos.
That's amazing advice. And on a personal perspective, I could not agree more. Is personally, over the last couple of months, I've had to look in my corner, and I realized that I had a lot of people on my bus that just didn't get it. And I realized that I wanted them to be more positive, and I wanted them to be more supportive. And the reality is they're just not supportive, and they're not positive people, and extremely selfish. And it's tough in life, you need to make tough decisions. And the reality is everybody is not for everybody. That's why every team doesn't win. It's why every corporation is not a $10 billion corporation. And it's why you go through those peaks and valleys of life. And it's the genesis of our company and our podcast is just no quit. Is you're going to get hit, and you're going to get hit again and again in life. And the question is, does it make you bitter, or does it make you better?
Yeah, no, I love it. It's fall down 7, get back up 8. And I love what you said about the right people on the bus. It's so key to take stock in that. Right? It definitely fuels people. And if we're not aware of who's on our bus, then it can't fuel us. It actually serves more as an anchor to our success.
No, I could not agree more. So last question is, what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you, and if they want to follow you? And I know you mentioned your website as well as Amazon and Barnes & Noble for your book, but what's the best way for them to connect or follow you?
Yeah, so they can go to michaelobrienshift.com. You can send me an email at michael@pelotoncc.net. And I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. There are a lot of Michael O'Briens out there, but put in Michael O'Brien Shift and you'll probably be able to find me. It's a common name. So, but the best bet is either through email or go right to my website, and you can send me a note and we can connect and talk about sort of no quit living, which would be a fantastic thing to do.
Michael, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. I truly appreciate you, and I definitely look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thanks, Chris. It was awesome. Great conversation. And I say this all the time. This is another movie reference, but I'll leave on this. Have fun storming the castle. That's from The Princess Bride, which is another favorite movie of mine. So thanks for having me on, buddy. Thank you for listening to episode number 97.
One thing that Michael said early on was that as a kid, he wasn't always the fastest, but he could always get up. His devastating accident clearly defined that mindset. After his accident, Michael wrote a book, which in itself is quite an accomplishment. However, the best part about his book is that all of the proceeds go to a charity that Michael truly believes in. Talk about paying it forward. One thing Michael shared with us was the fact that while he was recovering, he definitely could have been angry and revengeful, but he chose not to be. Instead, he changed his mindset and switched lanes from being a victim to a victor. In his parting words, Michael discussed the importance of having great people in your corner and the fact that who is in your tribe matters. That has been a common theme throughout the last month and something that has been discussed quite a bit. Doing the right thing and being a good person is such an important part of life, but so is having the right people in front of you, next to you, and behind you. But you can't just have those great people in your corner. You need to make sure that you are in the corner for others as well. So as you go for your greatness today, I would like to leave you with a quote. God will always bring the right people into your life, but you have to let the wrong people walk away. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.